Thank you, Paulina, for joining us today. Paulina is the CEO and founder of Friesland Collective, and she helps U.S. citizens get into colleges overseas. So, Paulina, thanks for joining us. Maybe you can give us a one-over again about what you do and how you help college students, and then maybe we can get into the conversation of what life on campus might look like come this fall 2020 in a world of COVID-19.
Hi, thanks for having me. What I do day to day it varies all the time, but mainly what I do is I focus on helping US families navigate their admission to the UK. So that's Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and England. And that is mainly what I do day to day. On the flip side, I also help UK universities navigate the US. So what that means is I help them set up processes on their campuses that are US friendly, set up different activities on campus and different recruitment methods to make themselves a little bit more attractive to American students. But on the US student side of things, that's where it all started. I studied abroad, I studied in London. I never left. I'm from the US, obviously you know Joe. We went to high school together. But that's my history and that's what I do. And I'm glad that you guys have me on here because the situation internationally for students has been crazy over the last couple of months. And there's a lot that we can talk about in terms of student sentiments and what international students want to know about the situation that they're about to face in September.
And I don't mean to interrupt you, Paulina, but do you mind giving the audience a background on why you started the agency and kind of your experience of traveling from the U.S. overseas to school for maybe some high schoolers who might be considering this type of route?
Sure. So the reason why I found it, the reason's long-winded, but it stems from this exact thing you've mentioned is experience. So my experience of studying in London was amazing. It almost felt like it was the most incredible experience I could have possibly had for myself. And I was the only student in my high school that I know of to this day to study abroad full time in a different country. So our high school wasn't necessarily the type of place that had an incredible amount of wealth and students going to amazing universities around the world. So this was never discussed. And my college advisor, our high school counselors didn't give us many options is the best way to put it. So I kind of was left to navigate the entire process by myself with my family. And it was my mom that suggested London, mainly because we are European, so we know that system a little bit better probably than the American system because my parents are immigrants. So that is, I think that's where that stemmed from, that idea stemmed from. But once I went to London, I realized this opportunity. I remember sitting in the classrooms and thinking, this is the best opportunity I could ever have given myself. It is financially a great chance to come out of college relatively debt-free. But this was 10 years ago now, so things have changed. But I remember I remember thinking these things and I wanted to tell other students, but I didn't have a platform. When I graduated, I then moved to China for a little bit to do something else. But then when I came back, I was recruited to work for a London university. And then over time, actually was involved in international recruitment for US. So we grew that market, we established links in the US, and that school has a steady pipeline of like 120, 130 Americans going there every year. When we started, there were probably 10. So we opened up a little bit of the US for that school. So after that, to keep long story short, after that point, I realized actually I don't just want to help American students go to this one particular school. I think the UK and the world has amazing opportunities, and American students aren't aware of all the amazing schools that are out there outside of the US. I think Americans are spoiled for choice at home. I think there are awesome universities all over, in-state, out-of-state, great options, but the world is their oyster, and they have options abroad. So I founded Friesland for that reason. I was a little bit fed up with how international schools market themselves. I felt like they aren't doing a very good job. And I was also fed up with only marketing one school. So that's how Friesland Collective was born.
You've had a unique perspective then, not too long ago, really, not at least not in the far past, of going through these same experiences that a lot of these students that are watching today might. But let's just get into it. So if I was a student that was enrolled in college this last year, obviously COVID-19 hit us early on in the spring semester, and we've had a much different college spring semester than we're used to. But what should I expect coming back in the fall? What's going to be different on campus? What does the admissions process look like now? Will I be only remote learning? What are you seeing right now in the industry? What should college students be expecting coming back this fall?
Well, so the overall picture around the world, and I will speak very broadly, the data I have for you guys today covers all different countries. It covers North America, UK, China, India, Australia. We have quite a lot of data available in Europe, and the overall picture, I'd say, for international students is that there's an insane amount of uncertainty, and that is what they have to somehow get comfortable with approaching September 2020. We can go kind of like in a pros and cons direction. So, the pros is that there's an incredible amount of flexibility in terms of admission requirements. So US, as you know, the SAT and ACT test was not able to be taken during these crucial months in the spring. So even though ACT and SAT are adapting, what most US universities did was they became test optional. This is not actually new. The US schools have been thinking about becoming test optional for a while, but if you're an international student coming to the UK, coming to the US or anywhere, that flexibility is obviously there. So, universities are very aware that numbers are going to drop, which means revenue and income will significantly fall. So they will do certain things to make themselves a little bit more attractive, which is great for a student, because I think, from a student perspective, universities are expensive. Everything about the university experience is valuable and holds immense value, but they are expensive, and the loans are, very, very, very high and costly, and not kind of in the 21st century as I would see it. It's still very much all covered in red tape. So in a way, it feels like the pandemic almost allowed for us to kind of speed up and have universities offer the flexibility that they should have been offering. So I would say that's a positive, because if you didn't think you could get into a certain school, now you possibly might be able to get in. But the negatives is that the costs kind of remain the same. So, and that's not cool from a student perspective when you're an international student and you are investing quite a lot of money to have a different experience, to have more opportunities, and are faced with the potential of starting your semester online. So that's where it's becoming tricky, and the uncertainty might sway some students' decisions as whether they would want to even follow through with admission. If you think about it, starting the semester online is, for health reasons or for public health reasons, it's a great idea. It makes perfect sense, but it's all about how the university will then enhance the offering and make the experience more attractive on campus. Or just in general, what are they doing to make themselves stand out, and kind of what are they doing to support students? That's going to be the next question for universities. I'm trying to think of any other pros and cons that are currently being discussed. Obviously, very obvious uncertainties revolve around the essential things, and essential services. And one of them being, getting a car when when you arrive in the U.S. That is, to me, as someone that grew up in America that now lives in London, where you don't need a car, having a car in America is incredibly essential. So those things are going to become a little bit more tricky and important to iron out for international students. Visas is another thing. If you think about visas, student visas are so important. Well, they're the only way to get into the country. If embassies are closed and biometric offices are closed and post offices are closed, then how are students around the world supposed to submit on time? And further, if the embassies in the US are closed or around the world, then the processing times will be delayed, and it's like a crazy spiral that obviously leaves students not very happy.
Well, the first thing you said about admissions was interesting, because if I'm a high school student and I had that dream college in mind, but maybe my grades weren't to standard, now it seems like it might be a fire sale almost, if you will, to get into those universities. But I'm curious as well on the admissions side of things. So I had read a report from the UK, and it was a couple weeks ago, so maybe you can fill us in on this, but are admissions now getting extended into the fall? So I think it's rolling admissions now, you said. Does this change? What I'm wondering is if this changes anything for students that are high school seniors this year that are going to be looking to apply for coming to college maybe next year. Is there anything that changes with that admission process for them?
So I'm glad you're asking about that flexibility in terms of rolling admissions. So the UK, for example, has been traditionally very, very strict in their entry criteria. But what we are also is very transparent. So if you compared your college admission process, which maybe was, involved your extracurriculars and all these great things and achievements you did in high school, the UK is very transparent. It asks for certain number on your SAT or ACT, and a certain GPA and a certain AP, and that's pretty much it. They don't care about what you do in your spare time. So they, in response to this situation where students can't take standardized tests, have become more flexible. So they're looking at different types of tests. For example, students that have to take an English test to prove their English language proficiencies are able to now even use Duolingo, which was just, like a startup a couple of years ago, never would have been considered by UK universities, is now an option to get in. So that's been beneficial on my side of the pond. But for US, for example, US has been very strict on deadlines, not so much on entry criteria, but on deadlines. We have our May 1st deadline here where students deposit. So, we call it deposit day, and everything's very, very specific to dates. This early admission, early action, there's a deadline for everything. That's become rolling admissions. So it's almost like the US took on what UK was really flexible with, which is the deadlines, and took that to, and implemented that. And then the UK took the US entry criteria flexibility and took that. So it's interesting, but for a high school student, if I was a high school student now, I would be shooting for the stars. I would not even, I would just be shooting for the Ivy Leagues, top of the top, because why not? This is like a once in a lifetime opportunity, literally. So I wouldn't necessarily defer. I would not delay a start date. And I say this to my students all the time. I speak with postgrads, undergrads, people that are thinking of leaving their full-time job to study an MBA. Then I say to them, I understand why you might want to delay, because you're afraid the experience won't be worth it, or, it'll be tainted, or it'll be it'll be different, but my personal my personal opinion is get the admission done and then maybe defer once you get admitted, because there is no point in delaying admission, delaying your thought about going abroad. If you're going to study, apply now, get it done, get it over with, get admitted, and then decide if you want to go this year or next year. The flexibility is always there.
Now, you were just mentioning, folks that want to go back to, grad school and all of that. But what about transfer students? Have you seen a different trend now? Students transferring, they're looking abroad, they're looking from, maybe they're going to school in the UK and they're looking at the United States as an option. What have you been seeing there right now?
So you will, international students around the world will not do transfer. You will never see international students necessarily transferring just because they want to. It usually is tied to certain agreements, right? So if you're a student in China and your university has a 2+2 agreement with a school in America, a college in America, then that's a direct route. So that student already 2 years ago would have said, I'm now going to go to America after 2 years of studying in my hometown. And those agreements are super popular because they're less expensive. So if you're an international student, and your family income isn't very good, you can't afford 4 years in America, you can afford 2, this is the best option. Now on the flip side, the US is a little bit different. So I actually used to set up, I actually used to set up agreements between the UK and the US community colleges, because I personally thought, if you're a student in America, you go to your community college for 2 years, you then can transfer to the UK for 2 years. You get the best experience, you don't have a lot of debt, it's a win-win. It's not been as fruitful. And I think it's mainly, because of I think it's mainly due to the type of route that certain students take when they attend American community colleges. They are very set on what they're going to do with their future and their degree. And it's a bit of a far-fetched idea to transfer out of country. But now, anything can happen. Strategically, I think community colleges in America will struggle because U.S. Full public, well, what do you guys call them? You call them four-year colleges. Four-year colleges are becoming far too flexible and flexible with their pricing as well. So I think community colleges will struggle a little bit because of that flexibility,
You brought up Duolingo before, and I want to dig into that a little bit, because there are some students out there that maybe don't take online classes because they find that they learn much better by being in the classroom, being there in person. But this past spring semester, that all changed because everyone was kind of forced to do this remote work if they were sent home from their colleges, or maybe they're used to online learning. But what I'm curious is there any software or programs that you find are very beneficial to students that have to work remotely, or they do online classes in the event, say this fall comes around and I can't go back to my college campus yet because the laws are preventing me from doing that, but I don't really learn that well in person. Are there any tools or software that you've seen that have really helped students with learning online, or maybe bettering their skills or keeping track of stuff?
I don't know. I don't actually have that much information on the tools that universities are using to deliver. I know that this is obviously the space that's going to grow massively. But I do have an interesting announcement that's just come out today, which is ironic. And this has nothing to do with the US. It's between China and the UK. So I'm sure all of you know the company Alibaba. So it's the Chinese eBay, right? Or Chinese Amazon. What do we call them? Chinese Amazon?
Amazon. Yeah.
Amazon. Yeah, massive. Maybe even better than Amazon.
It's bigger.
So they have just partnered with JISC, which is a UK company, and they're providing a cloud pilot project which basically is focusing on improving online access in China. Because what you have now is you have all these students that studied in the UK, so they did their, they started their degree. They're potentially going to have to start their first semester online, so there's absolutely no point, and their visa will not even grant them admission to the UK. So they have to, they have to do their course online. But as you know, what do you guys call it?
Connectivity.
Connectivity, that's the word. Sorry, it is 7 p.m. in the UK. My vocabulary is running dry. But that's a massive issue. And especially with Google being banned and all these different things, the UK universities have to adapt. And this particular partnership or project that they're working on is exactly that. It's looking at enhancing access for online education. So that'd be interesting to see how that pans out. I mean, I think it's incredible. You have someone like Amazon supporting education. It's a collaboration that would have never in a million years imagined that would even happen. But because Alibaba has such a presence online in China, they're in every household, they're on every iPhone or every phone that users people have. They're the ones to approach. So this is incredible, I think.
Now, for folks who will actually matriculate to a campus, apart from the online circumstances, any insights in terms of how students should anticipate what student life will be like in the fall, regardless of country, and how to equip themselves and so forth?
So the long story short on that, there is no answers in regards to what it will look like yet. And I think that's because universities are reluctant to really paint a picture. However, I know American universities are ahead of the curve, and they are already planning up to 15 scenarios that they are going to decide on last minute, most likely. So I think most of the scenarios is the worst case scenario, you start online. And then once January comes around, so after Christmas, if you do end up on campus, then it would be very strict social distancing in the classroom, and then probably a cut social program, which will I mean, I feel sad just even talking about it because it doesn't sound appealing at all. If you think about going to college as an athlete, there's nothing worse than socially distancing. Your team are incredibly close to you in general, physically and emotionally. So I think it will be difficult for universities to figure out their contingency plans on this, and unfortunately they're not very clear. So once I get that clarity, we can have another discussion. But there is very little clarity on this specific topic, and I think it's because, I'll be honest, in the UK, our government isn't very clear on the guidelines. We as residents and citizens here in the UK don't know what we are allowed to do or what we're not allowed to do. So it's tricky. I mean, it's getting a little bit more clear. We're relaxing social distancing here. They're opening up pubs and restaurants, which I can't believe, but they are. They're not opening up gyms, for example. So it's a whole debate. But we will see. I know for a fact that UK, for example, have opened up schools, not colleges and universities, but primary schools and secondary schools. So they will, they will likely open up universities to some capacity, but we don't have enough answers on this, unfortunately. I think every university is reluctant to release that information because at the end of the day, we're still in the recruiting stage. And if you put something out there that will put a student off, then then you will lose that enrollment, or that student will defer, and that's what we don't want to do. So most universities are kind of painting big picture to international students. They're saying you can get a post-study work visa. We have, we will support you in your education and your further employment. You will have the opportunities. You will carry the brand of our institution, but they are not getting into the nitty-gritty, unfortunately.
Was there any more important information that you want either students or parents to know about coming into this next fall school year, or anything in general?
The word important it's almost crazy, because we're in such a crazy time for students, where for me it's every little piece of information that comes out that I've spoken about is so important. But for students, the idea is what is important to students, right? And that's what we have to focus on. What is important to students is their experience, first and foremost, I would say. Their experience, and obviously the value of the education they're getting. So those two things are on the most important on my list. And I think when it comes to experience, it will never be what you expect it to be. It will be what it is. I always say to students, don't have too many expectations before coming abroad, whether you're going to America or you're coming from America to a different country. It will be different. So, just take that kind of advice into 2020. It's all we can do is don't expect anything and just be pleasantly surprised.
Embrace it for what it is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's all we can really do. It might be incredibly different, but very, very, very good, and advantageous to, like I said, to their admission or to their future. But I would say another very important point is don't be afraid to ask for discounts and scholarships and admission. So just be kind of fearless in this respect, because you have the opportunity to bargain a little bit here, internationally, anywhere you go. I think that's for students. I'd say, with what's going on, is you are the future, and every university around the world wants you. You are incredibly wanted right now to keep them afloat. That's the truth. It's India, for example. I saw a crazy statistic last month, which said that India's education export, or the amount that Indians spend abroad on education, is something like 78 billion or 7 billion. I'm not entirely sure, so I apologize. But in April, it was 70% lower than what it was previous April. So that just shows you, major shifts are going to happen. So I'd just say, as I said, expect nothing, but keep moving forward and focus on the essentials. So focus on what can you actually achieve and receive from the university. So, like we were talking about, essentials in relation to your experience, or where you're going to live, or what car you're going to drive, or all these things. All these things will matter, and I think they're the exciting things we have control over. So maybe focus on that. Focus on what you can control, is how I'm going to finish this.
Great. Well, Paulina, we really appreciate you coming on again. And, the students listening, rest assured, Paulina will be on here again. We plan to have her on the show from time to time to give us these wonderful updates on the college life, college experience, and more tips and tricks on the admissions process. But Paulina, in case a student or parent has more questions about international schools, or has more questions about some of the stuff you've discussed today, where can they find you?
So students can go directly onto frieslandcollective.com. That is the website. That's our website. It's spelled Friesland Collective. And that's where we have our student-run blogs. So we have American students run our blog. It's very much about the U.S. student experience abroad. Nothing, I don't write the blogs. No one on my team writes the blogs. It's all student-led. The experience they have is what they share, from all sorts, from homesickness to their visa process, to to their experience at Pride and all sorts of different, important events. So go to the website, frieslandcollective.com.
Great. Wonderful.